Welcome back to our channel. This tiny dime could be hiding a big secret. Some are worth hundreds or more. Check your pocket change now. The year 1967 arrived in a nation caught between transformation and turmoil. The United States stood at the crossroads of history. Civil unrest, the space race, and the Vietnam War were shaping the identity of a generation. In that same year, inside the fortified walls of the U.S. Mint, another quiet transformation was taking place, one far more technical, seemingly mundane, but destined to become a numismatic enigma. The Mint, still adjusting to the Coinage Act of 1965, was producing coins under a modified framework. Silver had been phased out from most circulating coins, replaced by clad compositions that modernized the monetary system. Dimes, once forged in the dignity of 90% silver, were now struck in copper-nickel layers, practical, efficient, unromantic. By 1967, the transition was in full swing, and the production of Roosevelt dimes reached enormous volumes. The Mint, under pressure to maintain circulation and suppress hoarding, eliminated mint marks temporarily between 1965 and 1967, a decision meant to discourage selective coin collecting. It was intended as a reset, a quiet pause in the numismatic tide. But in the silence of that pause, a subtle error was born, one so rare that decades would pass before its full impact was even understood. In a dimly lit corner of a coin show in Des Moines, Iowa, in 1998, a collector named Helen Marsden shuffled through a dealer's surplus box, a common place for coin enthusiasts to dig for overlooked treasures. Helen had no grand expectations. She was a casual collector, fascinated more by error coins than perfect specimens. She found beauty in mistakes. That day, she came across a 1967 Roosevelt dime that seemed, at first, completely ordinary. No mint mark, as expected. It bore the smooth, familiar profile of President Roosevelt, and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch gleamed on the reverse. But something about the rim caught her eye. It appeared unusually broad, slightly thicker on one side than the other. Turning it in her hand, she noticed that the reeded edge seemed partially absent on one portion, and under magnification, she saw that the letters on Liberty appeared shadowed, as if they were echoing themselves faintly beneath the surface. The word, "In God We Trust," had an irregular texture, not doubled in a traditional sense, but appearing stretched, like it had been pulled slightly downward before being locked into place. Intrigued, Helen purchased the coin for just 10 cents. The dealer barely looked up from his chair. Later that night, back in her modest apartment, she examined the coin with her handheld loupe. The more she stared, the more peculiar it seemed. The entire coin bore a slight convex shape, as if the center bulged outward microscopically. The portrait of Roosevelt had an ever so slight duplication, a ghostly outline that appeared and disappeared depending on the angle of the light. She began researching error types, die clashes, off-center strikes, broad strikes. Nothing matched her coin completely. It seemed to be several anomalies in one: a misaligned die, a collar failure, possible die erosion, and maybe, just maybe, a misplanched origin. Unsure what she truly had, she submitted the coin to a prominent grading service. Several weeks later, the coin returned with an annotation Helen had never seen before: unidentified multiple strike/die anomaly, 1967 Roosevelt dime, -55 Australian dollars, investigation recommended. There was no clear category for it. Yet even without formal classification, word spread. Photos of the coin began circulating among error coin communities, and the questions multiplied. Some claimed it was a broad strike error, caused by a missing collar during striking. Others believed it was a transitional error, that perhaps the dime had been struck on a leftover silver planchet from 1964. One voice, a retired mint technician writing under a pseudonym, speculated the coin had been struck during a maintenance shift using improperly seeded dies. He mentioned rumors from 1967 of experimental adjustments to pressure calibration on older press machines, possibly leading to unusual die strikes on certain coins. Then, in 2001, another 1967 dime surfaced, this time at an estate auction in New Jersey. It too bore no mint mark, but displayed the same strange rim distortion and faint doubling on Roosevelt's profile. The coin was in better condition than Helen's and sold for $1,475. From there, more examples began emerging, but they remained few and far between. Most came from random locations, spread across the country, without pattern or predictability. Some showed mild misalignment. Others displayed a unique luster, as if the planchet had been slightly off in composition. One was even tested and found to contain a higher nickel concentration than standard, an anomaly pointing to experimental alloy mixtures. The coins defied traditional error classification. They were not flashy errors. No dramatic off-centers. No visible cracks or die breaks. Their rarity came from subtlety. It was a coin that whispered rather than shouted, and only the most observant collectors noticed the difference. By 2010, numismatic journals had given the anomaly a name, the 1967 ghost dime. Not official, but descriptive enough to stick. Collectors debated its origins endlessly. Was it the result of experimental die realignment? A misplanchet batch using obsolete stock? A pressure-setting malfunction during the minting process? Or perhaps a transitional strike that escaped the mint's intention? In each theory lay a deeper fascination. This was not a mass-produced error, but the artifact of a momentary lapse in uniformity, an imperfection so subtle it had eluded even the mint's rigid oversight. The value of these coins began to climb, slowly but steadily. First $12,200, then $11,500, then into the thousands for high-grade examples. But even as prices rose, new finds remained rare. By 2015, fewer than 2 dozen verified examples had been documented, and among them, no two were identical. Some bore stronger rim distortion, others clearer obverse ghosting, and still others showed nearly invisible signs of an unstruck collar edge. Then, in a surprising twist in 2018, a 1967 dime was submitted to a grading service with what appeared to be clear, raised remnants of a D mint mark underneath Roosevelt's neck, a virtual impossibility, given that 1967 dimes were not supposed to carry any mint mark at all. Experts were baffled. Could it have been struck on an older die accidentally reused from 1964? Or was it the result of a filled die retaining residue from past use? The grading company marked it as partial underlayer mint mark impression, under investigation. The news sent shockwaves through the coin community. A dime with a phantom mint mark in a year when mint marks were suspended added a new layer of mystery. What had once been a collection of curious rim distortions and soft doubling was now suspected to be the remnant of a forgotten test process, perhaps an internal die reuse program or a miscommunication in die decommissioning. The demand soared. Coin forums lit up with collectors searching for any 1,967 dimes with anomalies. Dealers began reviewing old inventory. Coin roll hunters took up the chase. But despite the renewed enthusiasm, new examples remained as elusive as ever. By 2021, the ghost dime had cemented its place among the most mysterious clad-era U.S. coins. And though experts still debate its exact classification, its market presence is undeniable. Collectors willing to part with their examples have seen bidding wars erupt across online platforms and auction houses. At a 2023 coin show in Denver, a collector named Mason Hart sold his certified MS-65 1967 ghost dime for a stunning $72,500 after an aggressive round of bidding. It was a coin with a story, one that buyers could not resist. Today, the value of this very rare 1967 US 1 dime coin continues to evolve, driven by its scarcity, intrigue, and the sheer unpredictability of its discovery. Most examples command between $65,000 to $140,000 depending on condition and distinctiveness. Yet even with that value on the table, some collectors refuse to sell. They hold the coin not as an investment, but as a testament to what the minting process can still hide, and what patient eyes can uncover. The ghost dime lives on, quietly carried in forgotten drawers, awaiting rediscovery, a whisper of a different time struck into metal. The year 1989 wasn't marked by dramatic changes in the world of U.S. coinage. The mints in Philadelphia and Denver continued their work with mechanical precision, striking millions of Roosevelt dimes for everyday use. These coins were utilitarian, born of copper-nickel-clad composition, devoid of silver for more than 2 decades by then. They rolled through presses, sorted into bags, and shipped across the country with the same reliability that had defined the mint's operations for generations. There were no new designs, no major announcements, no commemorative editions planned for that year's dime. To the average eye, it was just another run of Roosevelt coins, millions identical, indistinguishable, unremarkable. Yet within that seemingly flawless production year, a tiny mistake occurred. A mistake so precise, so quietly embedded into a small batch of coins, that it would go unnoticed for years. But for those who eventually saw it, it would change everything they thought they knew about what could hide in plain sight. It began in 2007 when a Florida-based collector named Julian Marks purchased a roll of mixed-date dimes from a yard sale near Fort Lauderdale. He didn't expect to find anything unusual. The seller, an elderly widow, had no idea where the coins originated, just that they had been sitting in a drawer since her husband's passing a decade earlier. Julian took them home, methodically examined each one under a magnifying glass, looking for common doubling errors, die cracks, or misalignments. It was when he reached the 1989 P dime that he paused. Something didn't look right. The coin appeared normal from a distance. The usual Roosevelt profile stared stoically ahead, and the reverse bore the familiar torch, flanked by branches. But under magnification, the word Liberty appeared unusually thick, almost swollen. The date, 1989, seemed to shimmer, not from wear, but from an odd impression that gave it a ghost-like outline beneath the numbers. The mint mark, P, looked oddly compressed, almost as if it had been applied with a different level of pressure than the rest of the coin. But the most curious feature was barely visible unless tilted at a very specific angle, a faint circular indentation beneath Roosevelt's neck, a curve with no obvious source or explanation. Julian, unsure of what he had found, posted photos to an online forum, where responses varied. Some dismissed the oddities as lighting tricks or minor mechanical doubling. Others were intrigued but cautious, unwilling to speculate without seeing the coin in person. One collector, however, asked an important question: had Julian weighed the coin? The standard Roosevelt dime should weigh 2.27 grams. Julian placed the dime on his digital scale. It read 2.49 grams. That tiny discrepancy, just over 0.2 of a gram, set off alarms. It suggested that the coin might not have been struck on a proper clad dime planchet. Julian submitted the coin to a respected grading service. Several weeks later, it returned sealed and certified, but not with a traditional error classification. The label read, 1989 P Roosevelt dime, weight anomaly, partial off metal strike, -58 Australian dollars, further study suggested. Along with the coin came a letter. It noted the unusual planchet weight and hinted that the coin may have been struck on a foreign coin blank or an experimental test planchet accidentally fed into the die press. There was no definitive answer. Just possibilities. This ambiguity turned the coin into a mystery, and the numismatic world loves a good mystery. Months later, Julian's coin caught the attention of a researcher who had compiled cases of U.S. coins struck on incorrect planchets. The researcher pointed out that during the late 1980s, the mint had been contracted to produce coins for a few Caribbean and South American countries. Theoretically, a blank intended for a foreign denomination, similar in size but heavier, could have been mistakenly used to strike a Roosevelt dime. That would explain the added weight and unusual impressions. But no one could prove it. The mint had long since destroyed its records for that batch. No logs remained. The error was undocumented, but it existed. The coin's value began to rise quietly, passed through whispers among collectors who understood what they were seeing. In 2010, another example surfaced, this time in San Diego. It bore the same weight anomaly and exhibited the same faint ghosting beneath the date and mint mark. This coin, slightly better preserved, was graded MS-62 and fetched nearly $14,000 at auction. Suddenly, the 1989 Roosevelt dime error wasn't an isolated fluke. It was a pattern. A small one, yes, but significant. By 2014, more coin experts joined the discussion, identifying subtle traits that helped authenticate the error. The coins all shared a minor die rotation on the obverse, so slight it was nearly imperceptible unless measured precisely. They also featured an unusual collar mark, raised ridges on the rim not consistent with standard Roosevelt dimes. With each new discovery, the mythology of the 1989 dime error deepened. These coins were not easy to find. Fewer than 20 authenticated examples were recorded by 2018, and only a handful were in mint state condition. Then came the twist that changed everything. In 2020, a numismatist attending an estate auction in Nevada purchased a group of unsorted coins inherited from a former mint equipment technician. Inside a velvet pouch labeled, "Personal Keeps, 1989," was a lone dime. It weighed 2.48 grams. Upon magnification, it revealed a faint outline of foreign text beneath the Roosevelt portrait, barely visible, like a faded imprint that didn't belong. Specialists concluded that this coin may have been double-struck, with a weak foreign impression underneath the U.S. strike. If true, this would mean that not only had a foreign blank been used, but that it carried remnants of its intended design before being repurposed at the U.S. Mint. That revelation pushed the error into a new class entirely. It was now more than a wrong planchet error. It was a cross-strike error involving two different coinage systems, a scenario virtually unheard of and nearly impossible to replicate. The story of the 1989 Roosevelt dime error went from oddity to legend. Collectors started naming it the "phantom alloy dime," referring to the unknown origins of its metal base. Some believed it was struck on a blank intended for a coin from Jamaica. Others pointed to Venezuelan contracts signed around that time. But no conclusion was ever reached. Only more mystery. By 2023, the value of the 1989 phantom alloy dime had soared. In a public auction held in Chicago, a pristine MS-65 example, with full torch lines and strong rim detail, sold after heated bidding for an astonishing $91,000. The collector who won the bid later admitted he had been searching for a high-grade version of the coin for over 10 years. That sale sparked new interest, drawing attention from investors and numismatists worldwide. The prices surged as more people realized just how few of these error coins existed and how poorly they were understood. Today, the 1989 US 1 dime error coin stands as one of the rarest clad-era dime anomalies ever confirmed. Its uniqueness is drawn not just from the physical features, the ghosted elements, the weight variance, the phantom markings, but from the story it tells about how even in the most regulated systems, human oversight, timing, and sheer chance can create something extraordinary. These coins remain incredibly scarce. They are almost never found in circulation, and most verified examples remain in private collections. The current estimated value of the 1989 rare Roosevelt dime error ranges between $55,000 to $125,000 depending on condition, strength of anomaly, and presence of unique understruck elements. Yet for those who own one, the real value may be in the tale it carries, the unspoken story struck in metal, hidden in drawers, waiting to be recognized by someone with patience, curiosity, and the eye to see what others overlook. And somewhere out there, perhaps still caught in the seams of everyday commerce, another one waits, silent and undiscovered. In 2001, the U.S. Mint was operating with unwavering momentum. The state quarters program was in full swing, dominating headlines and public attention. Collectors were focused on hunting down coins from each new state, meticulously inspecting their pocket change, exchanging rolls at banks, and obsessing over every detail of those larger 25-cent pieces. Dimes, on the other hand, had become background noise in the realm of modern coinage, unchanged, unfussed with, and taken for granted. The Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946, remained steady in its design. There was no special edition planned for 2001, no anticipated changes to composition, no public interest campaign. The Mint produced tens of millions of dimes that year at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, each coin expected to be perfect in its simplicity. But somewhere during the thousands of hours of continuous striking, a shift occurred. A small miscalculation, a subtle mechanical fault, or perhaps a foreign planchet slipping through the system, it wasn't noticed, and it wasn't stopped. And with that oversight, a tiny number of dimes entered circulation that would later be the focus of scrutiny, debate, obsession, and eventually, astonishment. The first to notice the anomaly wasn't a seasoned collector or a dealer. It was a 17-year-old high school student named Marcus Caldwell in Lincoln, Nebraska, who had recently taken up coin collecting at the suggestion of his history teacher. Marcus wasn't looking for anything extraordinary, he was simply sorting through spare change after buying a soda, laying out coins on his desk in his bedroom, flipping each one under the light to get used to recognizing mint marks and year types. That's when he spotted it. A 2001 P. Roosevelt dime. The mint mark looked fine. The obverse design appeared sharp at first glance. But something was off. When he turned the coin slightly, he noticed Roosevelt's mouth looked split. Like there was a shadow mouth beneath the actual image. The date also seemed to have a faint doubling. It wasn't dramatic, it didn't scream for attention, but it was there, like a second set of numbers trying to hide beneath the surface. Marcus compared it to another 2001 dime and saw the difference immediately. The edge also looked odd, less sharply reeded in one portion, almost as if the collar die had slipped during striking. He had read about errors, but he wasn't ready to call it one yet. He posted images on an online coin forum, where users debated its origin. Some brushed it off as die fatigue or simple machine doubling, common in high mintage years. But a few collectors with keen eyes disagreed. One noted that the D in Liberty seemed to curve inward unnaturally. Another noticed the lower portion of the torch on the reverse appeared blurred, as if struck twice without perfect alignment. Marcus sent the coin to a grading service, nervous and unsure. Weeks passed. When it came back, the label read, 2001 P. Roosevelt dime, unclassified die strike anomaly, XF45, evaluation pending. It wasn't a definitive label. But it confirmed something was different. That difference began to stir curiosity. Months later, another collector in Georgia reported a similar coin. This one had an even more pronounced ghost image behind the portrait and an unusual bevel along the rim. The weight was tested. It came in slightly heavier than standard. Standard Roosevelt dimes weigh 2.27 grams. This coin? 2.39 grams. A small difference, but significant enough to raise eyebrows. The suspicion began to grow that some 2001 dimes had been struck on the wrong planchet, or worse, on experimental blanks meant for other denominations or foreign contracts. Between 2002 and 2008, a total of 5 similar 2001 dimes were documented, each bearing consistent features: slight overstrikes on the obverse, softened reverse design near the torch, irregular edge reading, and minor weight discrepancies. But the real revelation came in 2010, when a collector from New York submitted a 2001 dime with what appeared to be the faint ghost of a second coin's edge design overlapping its reverse, an indication of a potential double planchet strike or die clash error never seen on Roosevelt dimes from that period. Experts were baffled. How had these coins escaped the mint's quality control? The answer, perhaps, lay in the enormous demands placed on the mint during those years. With the state quarters capturing the public's imagination and collectors hoarding coins by the box, the pressure to maintain production levels was immense. Machines ran longer, dies were stretched further, and oversight may have narrowed in focus, allowing small anomalies to go unnoticed. Theories began to multiply. Some speculated that leftover planchets from experimental presses were mistakenly fed into dime-striking machines. Others believed these coins resulted from press calibration testing gone wrong, strikes performed with slightly misaligned collars or faulty dies. But one theory stood out, that during a brief transition between die changes, a batch of planchets from another coinage system, perhaps foreign, was mistakenly used. The chemical composition of a few examples supported this. One 2001 dime, tested by a private lab, showed an elevated level of manganese, more consistent with the composition of dollar coin blanks from that era. If true, it would mean that these dimes were struck on planchets never meant for them, an extremely rare occurrence, and one not officially acknowledged by the mint. The numismatic world took notice. These weren't dramatic errors. They didn't involve off-center strikes, missing designs, or broad strikes. They were quiet mistakes, refined, nearly invisible to the casual observer, but shocking in their implications. Their rarity wasn't just in the number found, but in how easily they could have been missed forever. By 2015, certified examples began appearing in high-end auctions. A 2001 P. Roosevelt dime with perfect doubling behind the neck and a reverse clash sold for $18,000. Then, another with a visible collar die slip and anomalous weight fetched $31,000. Still, no one could agree on an official classification, which only made the coins more mysterious, more enticing. Collectors gave them a name: the shadow strike dimes. The name captured the essence of the anomaly: subtle, elusive, and partially hidden in the familiar design. In total, fewer than 20 of these dimes have been authenticated with the full range of unusual features: ghost doubling, reverse distortion, incorrect reading, and weight variance. Each coin seems to tell a slightly different version of the same story, a story of something slipping through, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to see what others couldn't. And then came the twist. In 2022, a new dime surfaced in Arizona. This one had the hallmarks of the earlier shadow strikes, but also featured a raised circular impression overlapping the rim, a faint, unexplained ring as if from a press misfire or planchet feed issue. Upon examination, the coin revealed microscopic traces of a foreign emblem beneath the reverse torch. It was unidentifiable, but it suggested a planchet once used for something else entirely, perhaps a coin never released, or one that never belonged to U.S. circulation at all. This coin sold privately for $89,000. Not because of its composition alone, but because it represented the possibility that something much stranger had occurred in the production line, something undocumented, unresolved. Since then, demand has only increased. Coin hunters have begun reviewing old rolls, coin shops have flagged every 2001 dime with any anomaly, and grading companies have adjusted their standards to examine these coins with greater scrutiny. But the truth remains elusive. The mint has never commented publicly. No documentation exists to confirm what happened. Only the coins themselves speak, and they whisper of error, oversight, and the fleeting nature of rarity. Today, the value of a verified 2001 shadow strike dime, when certified by a reputable grading service and displaying clear error indicators, can range between $45,000 to $115,000, depending on condition, strength of features, and uniqueness. These coins represent one of the quietest, rarest mistakes in modern U.S. coinage. They are reminders that even in the most structured systems, imperfection can be not just a flaw, but a discovery. Somewhere in a forgotten drawer or a coffee shop tip jar, another one may still lie unnoticed, waiting for someone, like Marcus, to look just a little closer. In 2011, the United States Mint was running at full capacity. Between the production of presidential dollars, America the Beautiful Quarters, and the standard issue denominations that kept daily commerce alive, there was no room for error, at least, not intentionally. The Roosevelt dime had become an afterthought to most collectors by then. It was unchanged, unmoved, steady in its design since 1946. With each passing year, billions of dimes flowed from the presses, stamped, counted, and shipped off without ceremony. The public barely noticed them anymore. There was no fanfare for the dime, no commemorative plans, no innovation in sight. But as with all systems built on precision and repetition, even the smallest deviation can become something extraordinary. And in that crowded, focused year of 2011, in the shadows of quarter programs and dollar coin experiments, something slipped through the cracks. In early 2015, at a flea market on the outskirts of Albuquerque, a retired machinist named Terrence Vaughn was flipping through a vendor's modest display of world coins and U.S. change. Terrence had spent years working with high-pressure stamping equipment in the aerospace industry and had developed a fascination with minting errors after his retirement. He understood machines, how they could fail, how timing could falter, how pressure, alignment, and calibration could dance in and out of precision. That day, what caught his eye wasn't a flashy misprint or a coin with an off-center strike. It was a 2011 P. Roosevelt dime that looked almost perfect, almost, the rim was slightly thicker on one side. Not dramatic, but noticeable if you knew what to look for. The mint mark, P, seemed ever so slightly tilted, as if it had been nudged during placement. Under magnification, the obverse fields, especially around Roosevelt's eye and jawline, appeared to shimmer with faint doubling. The word Liberty had slight stretching in its vertical strokes, and the 2 and 0 in the date showed an odd bulge at their base. Terence flipped the coin. The torch on the reverse looked weak, especially near the base, almost as if the die had missed a layer of the strike. But the branches were fully visible, and the legends were crisp. It didn't make sense. Terence weighed the coin. It came in at 2.33 grams, slightly over the standard 2.27 gram weight. Not enough to scream foreign planchet, but enough to raise questions. He measured the diameter, checked the reeded edge. Everything checked out within tolerance. Yet nothing about the coin felt typical. Intrigued, Terence sent the dime to a grading service with a note explaining the strange doubling and minor weight anomaly. Weeks later, the coin returned encapsulated and labeled, 2011, P. Roosevelt dime, die alignment anomaly/obverse doubling, -58 Australian dollars, additional characteristics under review. The grading notes added that the coin showed signs of a partial die rotation, along with unusual strike pressure inconsistencies. Terence shared his findings with an online collectors group, where the coin sparked immediate interest. Collectors debated whether it was a minor double die or a product of a worn die nearing the end of its life cycle. One forum member noted that he had found a similar coin months earlier in Seattle. Another chimed in from Kentucky. The descriptions were nearly identical: slight doubling on the obverse, weak torch detail on the reverse, and subtle rim imbalance. Each example had the Philadelphia mint mark and a slightly heavier weight than normal. But the strange thing was how few examples turned up. For a coin struck in the tens of millions, only a handful with these anomalies had been seen. And none were identical. Some had stronger doubling, others more noticeable rim distortion, and a few, perhaps the most intriguing, had faint traces of what looked like a second mint mark just below or overlapping the P, almost like a phantom impression from a die not fully cleaned before striking. By 2017, the coin had earned a nickname among collectors, the Ghost Overstrike dime. It wasn't an official term, but it captured the essence of the mystery. Something had gone wrong in the striking process, either with the collar, the die alignment, the planchet preparation, or some combination of the three. Some speculated that the coins had been struck during a transition between maintenance cycles, when dies were being swapped or recalibrated. Others believed the coins might have been part of an unrecorded batch of test strikes, perhaps involving alternate pressure settings or unfinished planchets. A few even dared to suggest that an experimental reverse die had briefly been used before being pulled, leading to inconsistent impressions on the torch and lower device details. What no one could dispute was the growing value. In 2018, a verified -58 Australian dollars example of the 2011 Ghost Overstrike dime sold quietly through a private sale for $14,000. In 2020, a sharper example graded MS-62 with stronger doubling and clearer rim distortion reached $27,500 in a public auction. Suddenly, collectors who had long ignored modern dimes began paying attention. Coin roll hunters started pulling aside every 2011 dime they came across, carefully inspecting them under loupe and light. But very few matched the traits. The known population remained under 20 certified examples. Each bore just enough variation to make them unique, yet similar enough to point toward a shared origin. Then came the twist that elevated the entire narrative. In late 2022, a numismatist working for a private coin research foundation published a report after acquiring and analyzing 3 separate Ghost Overstrike dimes. Using high-resolution imaging and metallurgical testing, the report revealed that all 3 coins contain trace elements of zinc and tin, an oddity not consistent with standard clad dime planchets. One of the theories proposed was that a small number of planchets intended for experimental coinage, perhaps even foreign contracts, had been mistakenly used during normal dime production at the Philadelphia Mint in early 2011. These planchets may have had slightly different alloy mixes, and when struck with worn or misaligned dies, they produced the subtle but distinct errors seen in these rare dimes. This finding reframed the discussion. The ghost overstrike dimes weren't just the result of faulty dies or collar slips. They may have been struck on the wrong material entirely, making them wrong planchet errors combined with die misalignment and potential transitional experimentation. That level of complexity, along with the limited number discovered, transformed them into one of the most coveted modern mint errors in U.S. coinage. By early 2024, prices climbed even higher. A high-grade specimen featuring nearly full torch details on the reverse, but clear obverse doubling and slight planchet discoloration, sold at a private collector convention for $67,000. That same year, a second coin with a verified dual mintmark impression, one faint, ghost-like, behind the official P, fetched $89,000 after intense bidding. Each sale pushed the boundaries of what collectors thought a modern dime could be worth. And yet, for every one sold, there were dozens of collectors still searching, still hunting, still hoping to find one in change, in forgotten coin jars, in overlooked rolls from bank vaults. Today, the very rare 2011 US 1 dime coin known as the Ghost Overstrike dime stands as a remarkable example of how even in an era of digital precision and mechanical control, anomalies can, and do, still occur. It reminds collectors that the smallest coin can carry the biggest story, that sometimes what seems ordinary hides an extraordinary truth. The current estimated value of this rare dime ranges from $35,000 to $93,000 depending on its condition, clarity of error features, and certification status. And somewhere out there, maybe still in circulation, another one lies unnoticed, waiting for someone with a keen eye and a bit of luck to discover a piece of history trapped in 10 cents worth of copper and nickel.